The next speaker we have is a very important person to the Vito Marcantonio Forum. I mentioned before Professor Meyer's book, Vito Marcantonio, Radical Politician. There's another book of at least equal importance called I Vote My Conscience by Annette T. Rubinstein. Many people have read this book and become interested in the subject, and the next person is one of those people. He didn't know Vito Marcantonio personally growing up, but he found out about him later in life, and while he was in law school, and he became an attorney. He's helped our group tremendously, and he's been instrumental in making a lot of things happen with the Vito Marcantonio Forum. And he also bears the name, and I'd like you all to welcome Frank Marcantonio.
Hello, everybody. My name is Frank Marcantonio, Jr. I've known the Vito Marcantonio Forum since the late 90s when my father, my brother, my sister, and I were invited to NYU in one of the earlier recognitions of Vito Marcantonio. It's an honor to be here on behalf of everyone who bears the name Marcantonio to give honor to his life and his legacy. As Adam mentioned, I have to admit, I really didn't know much about Vito Marcantonio when I was growing up. I would hear his name now and then. People would ask me, are you related to Vito Marcantonio? I didn't know how to answer that. I heard a lot of different things about him. He was this, he was that. I really didn't know personally. He passed away when I was entering elementary school. My father wasn't a political person. He was mostly preoccupied with his business, so I didn't really learn much about Vito Marcantonio or any family connections from him. Because I didn't grow up here in the New York metropolitan area, but rather the eastern part of Suffolk County, again, I wasn't exposed to a lot of information, a lot of the history that we've been talking about here today. I wasn't aware of the political history, the impact that Vito Marcantonio had, not just here locally, but in Washington and throughout the world. My own political leanings were formed when I was in high school and going on to college, partly because of the Kennedy administration. What was happening in those days, all the excitement, the newness of it all, the ideas really were inspiring to me and helped guide and form the opinions I had of myself and the world. New opportunities, new beginnings. I was exposed to the 60s liberal radicalism, if you want to call it that, when I was in college. I found it appealing on many levels. My views of the Vietnam War, the civil rights movement, female rights, equality, human rights were formed during that time. Little did I know that they were connected to this guy, Vito Marcantonio. I gravitated to those issues naturally, maybe because I was young, maybe because there was some genetic connection. I can't really say, but I felt comfortable in those positions. I supported them. I worked for them then, as I still try to today. Little did I realize I was carrying on the work of Vito Marcantonio. Although I'd never met him, the issues and positions he embraced were the same ones we marched for and still march for decades later. Fair and equal pay for workers, equality in society and law for all people, moral positions in international relations, freedom of speech and assembly under the Constitution. All of these I related to and voiced my support for then, as I do now. Years before, Mark had inspired and encouraged others to support and defend these same rights. Whether it was in his office on East 116th Street, the floor of the House of Representatives, in the media of the day, his Washington offices, or the lucky corner, Mark voted his conscience, and you always knew where he stood, with the unrepresented, the underpaid, the disenfranchised, and the voiceless many. He was their voice, and he still is. As I learned more and more about this courageous Italian-American, I admired and respected him all the more. The legacy of Vito Marcantonio lives on today because of what he stood for and fought for in life. And I must acknowledge again the efforts, the work of the Vito Marcantonio Forum, the tireless devotion that they put into keeping his memory, his legacy, his life alive. Thank you again, all of you. The things I stood for and fought for as a young man are the direct result of what Mark started and fought for his entire public life. That's why I'm proud to be here today, to give witness to that life and to that legacy. I'm proud to bear the name Marcantonio, and to be in some small way a soldier carrying on the good fight. I'm sure Mark would be pleased to know that those of us gathered here today to honor his life are still continuing the work he began. That, I believe, is the best tribute we can give him on this occasion. Thank you.